P. Diddy, the lieutenant, and the brutal attack. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The fields of entertainment, sport, politics provide rich pickings for me to identify narcissists, and then, through that real-life example, reportage of their behaviour, video footage, I can then give you a clear lesson. This lesson serves two fundamental points. One, it allows me to show aspects of narcissism with a living example, which makes it easier for you to, for instance, understand, let's say, the concept of triangulation. Or, what does a word salad look and sound like? Secondly, it enables me to explain the behaviours of these individuals so that you gain understanding as to why they do as they do. Often, I see people in below-the-line comments querying, why on earth has this pop star self-imploded? Why did that politician say that? And when you realise that the relevant individual is a narcissist, it really is like being given a key to a huge vault of understanding about many people in the world. No longer are you left scratching your head as to the seeming weirdness of their behaviour. You won't agree with the way that they behave, but you will now be able to make sense of it. And thus, that is why I have on repeated occasions analysed narcissists and non-narcissists to help you understand what to look for, but also to understand the differences in behaviour. And that's why I've analysed Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, Jada Pinkett Smith, Will Smith, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. That's why Shane Dawson has been analysed. It's why Cristiano Ronaldo has been analysed. Why I've looked at Taylor Swift and so many more that you'll find throughout this channel in the A Very series and those that have been placed under the Tudor scope. Many of you continue to suggest people that I ought to look at, and thank you for doing so. P. Diddy, of course, is providing me with a very prominent lesson with regard to the behaviour of a particular narcissist. Before all of this blew up, I created a series explaining why he is a narcissist. And now we're seeing his narcissism in full effect as a consequence of the criminal case and civil suits that have been filed against him. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating more of his narcissism in action based upon the complaint that has been lodged against him and other defendants by somebody called Ashley Parham. Now, whilst these are allegations, it's important to understand that in the context of multiple complainants and existing evidence that demonstrates that he's a narcissist, that we can see this through the prism of his narcissism to understand precisely what it is that he is accused of doing, and also to consider how likely it is that he has done those things and what that means in the context of his narcissism. To do this, I'm taking aspects of the actual document that has been filed by the lawyers acting on behalf of Ashley Parham. The lawyers are Sean Perez and Ariel Mitchell. They are the attorneys for Ashley Parham. The defendants are Sean Combs, aka P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Love, Puffy and Diddy, Christina Coram, Shane Pierce, John Doe's 1 to 3 and Jane Doe. I'm not going to go through everything in the document because it's 62 pages long. What I'm going to do is take out particular aspects of it to help you understand more about the dynamic and the behaviours. I think it is only right that I warn you ahead of time that some of the things that I'll be making reference to are of a graphic and sexual nature. Thus, you have been duly warned. This complaint involves allegations of sexual assault, battery, rape, sexual abuse, false imprisonment, and kidnapping, which, if made out, are demonstrative of an individual with no emotional empathy, but also exhibiting sadism. An individual who has no boundary recognition and looks to control an individual by kidnapping them. In terms of who the other people are, Christina Coram is an employee of Diddy, often referred to as his right-hand woman. In other words, the narcissist's lieutenant. Now, pausing there briefly, what is the narcissist lieutenant? Well, you can go and watch specific videos about that if you'd like to. But in essence, this is an individual that carries out the bidding of the narcissist. Invariably, they do so because they are in line with what the narcissist wants. A lieutenant can be a friend, a family member, it can even be a partner, it can be an employee. Here is an employee. So a non-intimate secondary source in Diddy's fuel matrix is a lieutenant. This person is particularly loyal, and they will invariably undertake acts on behalf of the narcissist, doing favours for the narcissist, carrying out the instructions of the narcissist, possibly causing problems for other people at the behest of the narcissist, because they exhibit a particular level of devotion to the narcissist. That level of devotion could be born out of loving the narcissist, feeling loyalty by virtue of being a family member. It can arise as a consequence of the fact that they are beholden because of an employment relationship. But even then, it goes beyond simple employer and employee, that they buy into what the narcissist suggests. In some instances, the lieutenant might act because they fear the narcissist and fear what might be done to them if they don't comply. But we have here Christina Coram, who would be identified as a lieutenant. Now, the complaint states that most victims of Diddy were employees, sex workers, or individuals who were seeking out the defendant to help launch their careers, i.e., that made them particularly vulnerable because it could be exploited. The complaint explains that the plaintiff doesn't fall into those categories. The plaintiff actually happened to meet Diddy owing to happenstance and still ended up being brutally victimized. Thus, they weren't necessarily lured in the same way, but the outcome was similar. Shane Pierce is an individual who resides in California, and defendants John Doe's 1 to 3 and Jane Doe are also individuals based in California. The case is that Ashley Parham suffered harm and was injured by P. Diddy. It's explained that she'd repressed her experience until recently, when Diddy was accused by his ex-girlfriend, former employee Cassie Ventura, the person that he was seen on camera physically assaulting, and others regarding their experiences with Diddy. It states that accessing the civil justice system allows the victim survivor an opportunity to seek accountability for the years of suffering caused by the abuse they experienced, and a chance to take back the power they lost as a result of the sexual assault. The complainant, Ashley, met Shane in February 2018 after an altercation with another man at a bar, and Shane came to her rescue. While outside the bar, with friends and other patrons, Shane FaceTimed Diddy and was showing Diddy to other people. He was seeking to impress them by saying, "Look, here's my famous friend." He showed that to Ashley, but she wasn't impressed. And the reason was that she believed that Diddy had something to do with the murder of the rapper Tupac Shakur. She could see Diddy on the phone along with his children, Christian and Quincy. Diddy heard Ashley make a remark about the fact that she believed he had something to do with the murder of rapper Tupac and that she wasn't interested in him. And he said that she would pay for her statement regarding Tupac and her overall dismissal of Diddy. Now, pausing there. At this juncture, Ashley has come up on the fuel matrix of the narcissist. She is a non-intimate tertiary source. Diddy doesn't know who she is. She knows who he is by virtue of being famous. But in his fuel matrix, she's a non-intimate tertiary source, which means she's way down there in the hierarchy. Nevertheless, the fact that she said, I don't want to talk to him, I think he was something to do with the killing of Tupac Shakur, or words to that effect, is fuel because it's directed towards Diddy, but it's challenge fuel because she's suggesting that he's done something wrong, and moreover, she's not interested. That naturally threatens his sense of control because he is the almighty Diddy, and everybody should want to speak to him and want to engage with him. Nevertheless, he then issues a threat saying that she is going to pay. That threat is issued for the purposes of assertion of control. He's stung by what she has said and he reacts to it. The content of the complaint states that on the 23rd of March 2018, Shane invited Ashley over to his home to assist him with his cancer medications because he stated he was weak and unable to open his medications. When she got there, he said that he wanted to give her a ride in his new car. So they went out for a bit and then they came back. When they returned, he left the door to his apartment partially open and said that there was a reason for that because it wouldn't close completely. They then began to watch a movie, and after about 10 minutes, Diddy walked in. It's said that he walked in a grand, ready-to-party manner, which is, of course, the boastful belligerence of the narcissist. And apparently his grandiose entrance, narcissist, of course, was so loud that the dogs upstairs began barking. Accordingly, it would appear that Diddy was able to enter and did so quite freely into the house where Shane lived. What then happens is Diddy arrives with his bodyguard, defendant Doe 1, a woman who is identified as the right-hand woman, KK, another woman who has a small skinny build who was early 30s with blonde mid-length hair, who Ashley's been unable to identify, another person who apparently is a friend of Shane and Diddy, and Diddy's driver who remained outside and in his vehicle. It's the belief of the complainant, the plaintiff, that Shane, acting in effect as a lieutenant of the narcissist, so we have two lieutenants here, the other defendant, Christina Karam, who's been identified as the right-hand woman of Diddy, and Shane. And it's the belief, and it seems credible, that Shane, acting as a lieutenant, set things up to organise for her to be at the house so that P. Diddy arrived. When Diddy arrived, he began to antagonise Ashley, stating, "Oh, you thought you'd never see me in person, and you're going to pay for the statements that you made in the video call." Now, pausing there. When that video call took place, that was in February 2018. Now we're at the end of March 2018. So why is it that P. Diddy is bringing up events which are conceivably anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks ago? Would he not have dealt with the threat to control at the time? Yes. When she said, "I'm not interested," he issued a threat. That was a direct assertion of control. And it may well be that she backed down, that she shirked from that threat, which will have given him that unconscious sense of control, that subconscious sense of control over her. So why is it then that there was the organisation to set her up? Well, she's been painted black. And she will have come back on the radar at some juncture as a consequence of somebody mentioning her name. That P. Diddy might have been reminded of her insolence. And this shows the petty nature of the narcissist of the type that P. Diddy is. That a more evolved narcissist wouldn't bother their backside with somebody who's a non-intimate tertiary source. They're just little beetles scurrying around at the feet of the mighty edifice of the greater. But for P. Diddy, when she comes back up on his radar at a later juncture, his narcissism basically says this to him in his subconscious. That's the bitch that dissed you. Remember, she's painted black. She's not under control at this moment in time because you've thought of her again. You need to do something in order to get her under control and, because she's painted black, teach her a lesson. And thus his narcissism causes him to organise, it would appear, for her to be lured to Shane's house, and then Diddy turns up. Immediately, when he sees her in person, he needs to get her under control. So he starts to do so by antagonising her by talking about her paying for the statements made, and that he's caught her exhibiting his grandiosity. The complainant explains that Ashley was in shock as she never believed that she would ever see or meet Diddy in real life, let alone in the small apartment rented by Shane. Diddy then began advancing towards her, and he had a knife. He then held it to the right side of her face and threatened to give her a Glasgow smile, i.e. slit her throat, in retaliation for her previous statements on the video call, use of threat, again for the purposes of assertion of control. At this point, one of the lieutenants, KK, explained to Diddy she didn't think giving Ashley a Glasgow smile would be advantageous to their potential clients, who they could sell Ashley for sex to. So the lieutenant is joining in with the harassment of this individual, demonstrating that she is a loyal lieutenant to P. Diddy. She is issuing threats of sex trafficking towards Ashley. The lieutenant then made a threat to Ashley that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. Now, this isn't the analysis of the lieutenant in terms of what that person is, as to what Christina Karam actually might be. She could be another narcissist. After all, two narcissists can work in tandem. She could be a normal who is loyal to P. Diddy and as a consequence of that loyalty sees Ashley as a problem and has no emotional empathy for her by virtue of the distance in relationship between the two of them, and also because she is in effect taking Diddy's side. The lieutenant of a narcissist can be drawn from any of the groupings. Another narcissist, somebody narcissistic, even an empath, alongside normal also. But here, she is demonstrating her lieutenant credentials by engaging in the issuing of threats towards Ashley. Shane then partially undressed Ashley, and then Diddy removed the remainder of her clothing, removing the knife from her face, and then retrieved a bottle of liquid. He then squirted a bottle of liquid on her, and she was fearful that she was being squirted with a chemical substance like acid. However, she soon realised that it was oil, a lubricant, which of course we all know from the raid that was done on Diddy's properties that he had thousands of bottles of baby oil. Her clothes were removed so that she was naked, so humiliation, and she was covered all over with this oil. The lieutenant, KK, was then told by Diddy to insert what looked like a syringe from sterile packaging into Ashley's vagina. Sexual assault. The lieutenant did as she was told, and then told Diddy that she was unable to use the IUD because it had been prematurely released from its packaging. Diddy, upset by this threat to control, took the syringe from KK and tried inserting it in the plaintiff's vagina instead. Sexual assault, lack of emotional empathy. The lieutenant, KK, and Diddy began to argue as the defendant KK continued to advise Diddy that since the IUD had been prematurely released from its packaging, there was no way they could insert it into the plaintiff's vagina effectively. After some time, Diddy heeded the advice of the defendant KK and removed the syringe from the plaintiff's vagina and handed it to his lieutenant. The lieutenant and Jane Doe then exited Shane's residence, leaving Ashley alone with Diddy, Shane, and Does 1 and 2. Diddy then picked up a television remote that was near to Ashley and violently inserted it into her vagina. That, of course, is a rape and is a very serious form of sexual assault, demonstrating an absence of emotional empathy and a sense of entitlement. Whilst he was doing this, he said that her life was in his hands, grandiosity, and if he wanted, he could take her and she would never be seen again, threat. Her response was to hysterically cry, which of course is negative fuel, precisely what the narcissist wants. And this was a consequence of the threats and the pain of what she was experiencing. At this point, Diddy instructed his other lieutenant, Shane, to turn Ashley onto her stomach. Shane then grabbed Ashley by her abdomen and hips and turned her onto her stomach. Diddy then instructed his lieutenant, Shane, to put a pillow over her head because he didn't want to see her face or her cries. He then instructed his lieutenant to rape anally Ashley. This is what the lieutenant then did. He complied with the demand that was issued by Diddy. Pausing there, this is the commission of a serious sexual crime, and the lieutenant did so willingly, without demurrament or hesitation, demonstrating an absence of emotional empathy from him towards Ashley, and also his loyalty towards Diddy. Diddy is exerting his control over both his lieutenant and the victim, Ashley. Then Diddy raped her anally. Then defendant Doe 2 joined in, raping her anally, and then he left. Then Diddy instructed defendant Doe 1 to rape her. So he's engaging in raping her and instructing others to do so as this victim experiences multiple anal rapes. Instead of raping her, Doe doused her with more oil lubricant and then treated it like a slip and slide, knocking the wind out of her, joining to his enormous side. He then caught himself from sliding over her oiled body and off the bed, and he raped her vaginally. Whilst this was going on, Diddy sat in a chair near the bed and began masturbating whilst recording her rape by defendant Doe 1. Another party's phone fell on the bed near Ashley, and she attempted to grab the phone, but it slipped out of her hands and onto the floor owing to the oil lubricant that had been doused all over her. Diddy then began laughing at her attempt to grab the phone, which of course is demonstrative of his absence of emotional empathy and the way that he belittles her. Throughout this, Diddy made constant belittling remarks to her, stating that he owned her now, sense of ownership, belittlement. When this had finished, the Lieutenant KK entered the room to examine the condition of Ashley, who was barely able to move or control her bodily functions. The lieutenant examined her to see if she needed assistance and was about to give her an IV fluid. Ashley can't be certain if this actually happened. The lieutenant then opened a different bag where there were several medicine bottles, IV fluid bags, and other unidentifiable powder-like drugs. A pill was removed from one of the medicine bottles and was given to Diddy. Diddy then inserted the pill into Ashley's mouth and down her throat, where she had no choice but to ingest the unknown pill. Another assault. Diddy, Shane, the lieutenant, and Doe 1 then exited the residence, and their they smoked marijuana and cigarettes, leaving Ashley in an almost lifeless state in Shane's bedroom. There, that demonstrates the manner by which she has been brutally assaulted, and in the circumstances is demonstrative of an absence of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement. Now, I've detailed the brutality of this attack to demonstrate the nature not only of the allegations, but if this is true, to drive home the nature of P. Diddy and how he has used lieutenants with regard to the devaluing behaviour towards this victim, how he has been a participant himself, demonstrating the objectification of this individual, how she is simply treated as a plaything, but also so that you understand that this treatment was meted out against her because she was painted black for her early insult of him. Naturally, this is an entirely disproportionate response by him to have somebody gang raped in this fashion. But nevertheless, it is demonstrative of the way that he functions, that in his world, it's merited. That he sees nothing wrong with treating her this way, because in effect she badmouthed him and suggested that he was involved in the murder of Tupac Shakur. It demonstrates the tissue-thin nature of P. Diddy, that his need for control is so affected by a non-intimate tertiary source saying this, so that when she came up on the radar at a later juncture, this is the outcome and response. What we have so far is an example of a narcissist utilizing two lieutenants. Now, lieutenants might be utilized, for instance, in stating the narcissist case, for instance, going around and talking to a former intimate partner primary source to get them to see sense for the purposes of resurrecting the relationship between that victim and the narcissist. The lieutenant might be utilized for running errands for the narcissist. Go and get me a 6-pack of beers, for instance. They might be utilized to go around and tell people that the victim is problematic, that they're crazy. Sometimes the lieutenant will do these things of their own volition. For instance, the narcissist will sit down and dole out a pity play to the lieutenant, talk about the way that they've been abused by the actual victim. And the lieutenant, who is loyal and feels sorry for the narcissist, not knowing that they are a narcissist, then goes and perhaps berates the victim for their behaviour, or goes round telling other people, perhaps within the family, about how that victim has been awful to her mother, who is the narcissist. Here, the two lieutenants not only carry out the orders of Diddy as per these allegations, but they're clearly involved in a criminal enterprise whereby there is in effect a kit that is organised for this activity to take place. That there is the provision of drugs, that they turn up with an IV device, that there was an attempt to insert an IUD. It demonstrates that the complicity of these lieutenants is such that they will engage in the commission of criminal acts with and on behalf of P. Diddy. The complaint continues by explaining that the complainant, Ashley, starts looking for her clothes and purse, her car keys and cell phone, but she couldn't find them anywhere. All she could do was find a t-shirt, which she found from the floor, and she put it on a naked body. She also found a black condom wrapper on the floor, which she assumes was used by one of the defendants, most likely Diddy. She then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and headed to the backyard, where her assailants were sat smoking. She concealed the knife on her left side as she exited the apartment to the backyard area. The Lieutenant KK was no longer in the backyard, but she was upstairs on the patio balcony with the defendant Jane Doe. The complainant, Ashley, walked to the backyard where Shane and Diddy were still smoking. Diddy was still partially nude from the assault, while Shane and Doe 1 were fully dressed again. Ashley sat down on a makeshift seat in the backyard. Diddy noticed her presence and stated that he was surprised that she was able to walk because he had given her enough drugs to take out a horse, demonstrating again the callous nature of this individual and the absence of emotional empathy. She asked Diddy what he gave her, threat to control. He simply laughed, belittlement, and didn't provide a response, nullification of threat to control. Diddy then made further comments to Ashley in a jovial, friendly manner, asking her why they hadn't partied together before, because it was so much fun, and he hadn't had any ass that tight in a while. Notice the dismissiveness, whereby he's engaged in a rape of the individual, but he now just references it as consensual in effect, that it was partying, and that he refers to the act as if it was something that they'd enjoyed together. Defendant Doe 1 then quipped Diddy, stating he probably hadn't had any ass that tight because he's not used to having anal sex with women. Diddy and Doe 1 laughed at that. Ashley told Diddy she did not party with him and she did not enjoy partying with him, and that he raped her. Challenge fuel, threat to control. Naturally, that is problematic for the narcissist, and the complaint states that he didn't like her response to his light-hearted commentary, and then he offered her money, bribery, and instructed her, issuing of order, to say that the violent rape was consensual and that she was a sex worker, in effect, revising history. Ashley became enraged and yelled at Diddy, challenge fuel. She stated that her rape was not consensual, she was not a sex worker, and she had refused to take any money from him and would tell the police that he had raped her. All of that, of course, is a threat to control. Diddy seeks to nullify that threat to control by telling her no one would ever believe that she had been raped by him, and if she did tell anyone, they would then harm her family. The complaint then explains that one of the other defendants, Doe 1, shows his phone, and it shows the outside of her estranged sister's residence, and she could see her sister sitting on the couch and her sister's spouse on the balcony, and there was somebody outside the residence streaming this video to defendant Doe 1. In other words, they were showing her, we know where your sister lives, and we're there now. Diddy then called his mother in an effort to further convince Ashley not to report the assault. Interestingly, and I'll be talking more about the relationship between Diddy and his mother in another video, Diddy's mother yelled at Ashley to not hurt her son. Notice the hypocrisy in all of this, and another individual who is either a coterie member or a lieutenant of Diddy supporting him, notwithstanding what he's done. Ashley told Diddy's mother that her son had violently raped her. Diddy's mother was unfazed by this and continued her demands with Ashley to take the money being offered and not report the rape to law enforcement. Therefore, it would appear that she's well versed in such behaviours from her son. Diddy then made further threats, stating he'd gotten off from bigger crimes, boastfulness, grandiosity, and he referred to Tupac, again further antagonising Ashley. Doe 1 then turned to Diddy and pulled his gun on him, asking him to repeat what he said in reference to Tupac. As the two of them were exchanging words, Ashley went behind defendant Doe 1, where he seemingly began to protect Ashley. Defendant Doe 1 then advanced to Diddy, questioning him over the comments that he'd made about Tupac. During this commotion, a neighbour directly across the street came outside and peered into the backyard and asked what all the commotion was about. Doe 1 pointed the gun at the neighbour and told him to mind his own business. Doe 1 then turned the gun back on Diddy. Ashley tried to grab Doe 1's hand that had the gun. The gun then went off and hit a hill behind Shane's residence. At that, which is a threat to control, Diddy then ran back up the stone stairs towards where his Lieutenant KK, Shane and Jane Doe were. Ashley then charged at Diddy, moving the concealed knife from her left hand to her right hand in pursuit of him. She then pushed Diddy from behind while on the stone stairs, causing him to fall with his back to Ashley. She then raised the knife in a rage from the events that had transpired with the intent of driving it into his back. He turned around and began pleading for his life. He's evidently exhibiting fear. Fear is being utilised by his narcissism to protect him, to nullify the threat to control that she poses with this potential physical assault. And naturally, it shows that with her threatening with the holding of the knife to injure him, that is a threat to control. She was shocked to see him acting as a victim. This caused her to halt what she was doing, and she went back down the stairs into the backyard. Diddy then chased after her and attempted to push her, but she was already at the bottom of the stairs and gained her footing, and she wielded the knife at him, grazing his abdomen. As a consequence of this commotion, the lieutenant, KK, and Jane Doe emerged, and then she began to give first aid to Diddy for the injuries that he had sustained as a consequence of what Ashley had done. She then sought to get to the exit, but was thwarted by Doe 1. But after a period of time, she was able to escape because the focus was on the first aid commotion in relation to Diddy. Ashley got onto the street and she began yelling loudly for someone to call the police. Doe 1 caught up with her and said that he was an undercover cop. Ashley doesn't know whether this is true or not. The earlier neighbour reappeared and asked what was going on. Just as she was attempting to answer, gunshots were fired in her direction. Ashley fled to a car near where the neighbour was also taking cover. She heard an SUV screeching and leaving the residence. She entered the home of the neighbour, who informed her that he had already called the police. She informed the neighbour that Diddy had raped her and shot at them, but he didn't know who Diddy was. Thereafter, a sheriff from the Contra Costa's Sheriff's Department arrived at the neighbour's home. Ashley explained to the sheriff she'd been violently gang raped by Diddy, and she didn't have her clothes, phone, purse, car keys, or cell phone. The sheriff explained that they'd received several noise complaints prior to the neighbour's call and instructed Ashley to find a way to get home. The sheriff didn't offer to take her home, nor did he call for emergency services for an ambulance, nor make any offer to take her to the hospital. The neighbour offered to let her sleep on his couch until she could figure out a way to get her possessions and get home, but she declined and only remained at the residence of this neighbour for a short period of time. She then went back to Shane's residence, where she found the door open and her clothes were readily accessible in his residence. Shane emerged as if nothing had happened and offered that she could stay at the residence while she slept it off. She asked for her purse and keys, but he said that he shouldn't leave her in that condition, saying that she was catatonic and in a state of shock. As a consequence of the state of shock and disbelief, she stayed at his home while he left. Later that morning, the Lieutenant Shane returned to the residence, woke her up and gave her back her purse, cell phone and keys, and she left. She then went home. She contacted her primary care doctor thereafter and asked for an HIV and STD test in fear of having possibly contracted the disease as a consequence of what had happened. And a few days after this, she noticed that Shane had begun driving a new car. It's Ashley's belief that this lieutenant was paid by Diddy for setting up for her to be raped. She attended at the hospital in April 2018 as a consequence of still suffering from the injuries sustained as a consequence of the assault. The hospital contacted Walnut Creek Police. They turned up and took a statement regarding her assault on March the 23rd. She had already told Contra Costa sheriffs about her rape, but that was ignored. She believed that this would be ignored also by the police. She believes that her statements that were made to Walnut Creek Police were captured by police body camera footage. She also believes that the statements that she made on March 23rd were captured by police body camera footage. She also filed a report to the Orinda Police Department on April the 17th, but she was too afraid to name Diddy as one of the assailants. She sought assistance from therapists in May 2018. She then asked the police for a copy of a report from Walnut Creek Police Department, but they sent a letter explaining they were unable to furnish this information. It was confidential and not subject to public release, despite her not being the public, and that she was the complainant. Evidently, there are some concerns about the police possibly having been got at by Diddy in relation to a lack of investigation and how she was treated in relation to the initial appearance by the police. Now, these are allegations contained in a civil suit, and therefore they've yet to be tested in a court of law. They've yet to be subjected to cross-examination. But if they are accurate, and remember, we know that Diddy is a narcissist. We've seen his behaviour captured on camera. We know of many other instances of his behaviour, and we know of many other victims that have spoken out. What this demonstrates is not only his complete lack of emotional empathy and the use of sexual violence towards an individual for the purpose of asserting control over them and drawing fuel, but also the way that he is so brazen that he has other individuals, coterie members and lieutenants, involved in the commission of criminal acts, and that he's entirely dismissive, again, underpinning his absence of emotional empathy, so as to suggest, take some money, forget about it, but if you don't, then you'll suffer further. This individual had the misfortune, to put it mildly, to come into the orbit of Diddy, on the basis that what she states is correct and true. The simple fact that she was unimpressed by him and mentioned that she thought he was involved in the murder of Tupac Shakur led ultimately to the narcissist, when she next came up on the radar, seeking to assert control over her and punish her because she was painted black, and doing so by orchestrating a gang rape. Whilst I appreciate the details of this may be particularly unpleasant, it's important for you to understand the nature by which certain narcissists will behave, but also what drives such behaviour in an instance such as this. And it also provides you with a useful understanding of the way that lieutenants and coterie members will go along with the needs and demands of the narcissist, even so far as to commit criminal acts. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.